So today we're going to dive into something pretty important, safely getting yourself off Xanax. We're doing a deep dive into this Rolling Hills Recovery Center article. You sent this over, right? And, well, it turns out this little pill everyone thinks they know, for anxiety, has some layers we need to unpack.
It does, yeah, it really does. You see, Xanax, alprazolam, technically, is a benzodiazepine. A powerful one, too. Gotta emphasize that. And it's prescribed so often for anxiety and panic attacks, right? Because, I mean, it's effective. But there's this element of, I don't know, almost deception to it.
Deception, huh? Okay, now I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Well, you see, the article, it really highlights how you can become dependent on it, even if you're using it exactly how it's prescribed, like a wolf in sheep's clothing kind of thing. You think you're just managing your anxiety, but then underneath, your body and brain are becoming reliant, on the drug itself. The article uses this phrase. It says, your body and brain will progressively acquire a dependency on Xanax. Like it sneaks up on you.
Yeah, that's kind of unsettling when you put it like that. Like you're just taking your medication as directed and bam, you're in a whole different situation. So what is it about Xanax that does this? What makes it different from other anxiety meds?
That is the question. And the answer is all about how Xanax messes with your brain. Without getting too sciencey, it basically slams the brakes on certain brain functions.
Yeah.
To dampen the anxiety. And here's the thing, while that works great short term, that constant suppression, well, that leads to dependence. Your brain gets used to Xanax doing all the work, right?
Yeah.
And then when you take it away, it's like suddenly cutting the power to a backup generator. They can get a little or a lot chaotic.
So we're not just talking about like folks misusing it. It's more like how our brains naturally react to Xanax even when we're taking it responsibly.
Exactly. And that brings us to the heart of it all, right? Withdrawal. We got to understand that stopping a medication like this cold turkey, even after just a short time, can have some serious consequences.
Yeah, the article mentioned seizures, and I got to say that kind of threw me for a loop. We're talking about a medication that's like commonly prescribed. Is that really a risk for anyone who's been on Xanax, or are we talking like extreme cases here?
It's definitely a real risk, and it just shows you how dangerous quitting cold turkey with something like Xanax can be. Remember how we were talking about your brain getting used to it? Well, imagine just yanking away that support all at once. You're not giving your brain any time to adjust, and that's when you see those really, really bad withdrawal symptoms, like seizures.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Like it's like suddenly trying to walk without crutches after you've been using them for a while. Your body needs time to relearn how to do things on its own, to like strengthen those pathways.
Yes, exactly. It's all about relearning. You got it. And one of the things this article talks about that I found so interesting is how when you're withdrawing, you can actually experience like rebound anxiety.
Right.
And panic attacks.
Wait, hold on. You're telling me that the very thing that Xanax is supposed to help with, it can actually come back even worse when you're trying to stop? That seems a little cruel, don't you think?
It's one of those cruel ironies, isn't it? But it really highlights just how complicated, how complex all of this is, how our brains and our bodies adapt to these medications. Right. Remember we were saying how Xanax kind of mutes some of those brain functions? Well, during withdrawal, your brain, it's gotten used to that quieter state, so it might overcompensate, and that can cause a big surge in anxiety, like your brain is trying to find its footing again after being on mute for too long.
Wow, that's kind of wild when you really think about it. So you're not only dealing with not having the drug anymore, but you're also dealing with your brain kind of going into overdrive. Are there any other surprising withdrawal symptoms they mentioned in the article? Because I'm not going to lie, I'm very curious now.
Oh, it gets even wilder, believe me. They had a whole list of symptoms, stuff most people wouldn't even think of. We're talking things like vivid hallucinations, really intense headaches, even feeling like you're having a heart attack.
Hold up. Hallucinations, really? As in like seeing things that aren't there?
You got it. Sounds crazy, I know, but it really shows you just how strong these medications are, how much they can change the way our brains work. And remember, we're not just talking about people who've been using Xanax for a long time or taking high doses or anything. This can happen even with short-term use.
Yeah, this is definitely giving me a whole new perspective on Xanax, and I bet it's a lot different than what most people think, Like, it's one thing to read a list of symptoms, but it's another to actually imagine going through it. It's got to be so jarring.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why you never, ever want to go through this alone. It's so important to have a good support system. Your doctor, of course, but also therapists, friends, family, people you can lean on.
So it's not even just about the physical dependence then. It's like this whole mental and emotional roller coaster you're going through at the same time. You're already in a vulnerable place trying to manage anxiety, and then on top of that, you get hit with all these intense and unexpected withdrawal symptoms.
You hit the nail on the head. And I think that's why that article, with its emphasis on a holistic approach, I think that really stuck with me. It's not enough to just deal with the physical part. You got to give people the tools and the support they need to deal with the mental and emotional stuff too.
Totally. It's about getting your well-being back in every sense. But okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about how we actually do that. Because we've established that quitting cold turkey is a recipe for disaster. But what about this whole tapering process? What does that actually look like in practice?
All right, well, imagine you're trying to get off a moving train, right? You wouldn't just jump off while it's still going full speed. That's what quitting cold turkey is like. Tapering, though, that's like slowing the train down gradually until it comes to a nice, safe stop.
Okay, I like that analogy. So how do we actually slow this train down? How does that work?
Well, the article, it talks about two main ways to do it. The first way is called direct tapering, and that involves slowly, little by little, reducing the dosage of the Xanax itself.
So it's like we're carefully turning the dial instead of just flipping a switch. It sounds like it takes a lot of patience, though, to taper off this way.
It really does. It's not a race, right?
Yeah.
The goal is to make it a gradual transition, something you can actually stick with. And the article, they made a good point that this whole process, it can take weeks, months, even longer. Depends on the person, how long they were taking Xanax, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's like we were saying before about giving your brain and your body the time to adjust. It's got to relearn those pathways, but there's got to be more to it than just lowering the dose, though, right?
Yeah.
What else makes tapering safe and effective?
You're right. It's not just about the pills.
Mhm.
The article really stresses how important it is to stay in close contact with your doctor. They're your guide through this whole thing.
Yeah, that makes total sense. You want someone who knows what they're doing, right? Someone who can keep track of how you're feeling, make changes if they need to.
Exactly. It's like, imagine you're hiking on a trail you've never been on before. Your doctor, they're like that experienced hiker who's there to make sure you don't get lost, that you're safe.
Okay, I like that. So we've got our guide, but what about our support system back home? Didn't the article talk about how important it is to have your friends and family in the loop?
They did. And for good reason. Letting the people you're close to know what's going on, it can make a huge difference. They can be there to cheer you on, to just listen when you need to vent, maybe even help take your mind off things when those withdrawal symptoms get bad.
Oh, distraction. Yes. A good book, going for a walk, even just watching something funny on TV. Sometimes you just need a break. But okay, beyond your social support, what about some more practical things people can do to make this process easier? I know therapy came up in the article as something that can be super helpful.
It can be. And there are actually a bunch of different types of therapy that might help someone who's tapering, like cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. That one's all about learning how to recognize and change those negative thought patterns, the behaviors that make anxiety worse.
So it's like retraining your brain, teaching it how to deal with anxiety in a healthier way, but it's not all about talking it out, right? I remember the article also talked about how important lifestyle changes can be.
Absolutely. Exercise, for example, can be really powerful. It's not just about being physically fit, but those endorphins, they can really do wonders for your mood.
It's like hitting the reset button on your brain, for sure. And since we're on the subject of what we put in our bodies, what about diet? I know the article talked about that too.
Oh, absolutely. Eating healthy, whole foods, it can make a huge difference in how you feel, both physically and mentally. Gives your body the fuel it needs, right? Especially when it's going through all these changes.
It's about giving yourself the best shot possible. I like it. And lastly, we can't forget about all those alternative therapies that are out there, things that some people find helpful.
Right. The article, it specifically talked about things like yoga and meditation. So those can be really good for managing stress and anxiety, which makes sense, right? Those practices, they can be super grounding, especially when you're trying to adjust to life without Xanax.
Finding your center, exactly. What I really liked about this article was how it wasn't just focused on the physical stuff. It acknowledged that tapering off Xanax, it's a whole body, whole mind experience, It affects you mentally and emotionally, too.
It's about, like you said, getting your well-being back on every level. And it really emphasizes something super important. There's no one right way to do this. What works for one person, it might not work for another.
So true. We all have different needs, different things that trigger us, different ways of coping. It's about finding what works for you, what feels right on your own journey. So if there's one thing I hope our listeners take away from this deep dive, it's that getting off Xanax safely, it takes time. It takes working closely with your doctor, having patience with yourself, and being open to trying different things until you find what helps you. It's not a quick fix. It's a journey back to yourself, back to feeling good.
I love that. And, as we wrap things up here, it got me thinking, the article focused a lot on what individuals go through, but
Yeah.
it makes you wonder about, like, the bigger picture. Like, what is it about our society that leads to so many people being prescribed benzodiazepines in the first place? That's a much bigger conversation, but it's definitely something to think about.
It really is. It's a reminder that this issue is complex. There are so many layers to it. So to everyone listening, please keep those questions coming, keep learning, keep the conversation going, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive.